Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I didn't find out because I was snooping. That would have been easier to live with, easier to file under my fault for digging. I found out because my daughter from my first marriage, Lily, sent me a wedding invitation addressed to David plus guest, and the RSVP form came auto-filled by Emma's corporate account. When I clicked the RSVP link at work, it asked me to confirm the guest's name. The email pre-populated it for me like it was doing me a favor, Eric Nolan. I stared at it too long, like the way you watch a spider in the shower trying to decide whether to flatten it or let it have its day. I deleted the plus guest and closed the laptop. 5 minutes later, I opened it again to make sure I hadn't hallucinated. Still there, Eric Nolan. The man I'd seen in the break room twice, tall, always checking his watch like time owed him something. Emma had RSVP'd to my own daughter's wedding with him as my plus one, using the same email signature I see when she forwards me grocery coupons. I didn't say anything. Not that day. Not that week. Not when she asked how Lily's seating chart was coming and whether my ex, Sarah, would be there with that yoga guy, and should we bring extra tissues because Lily cries when she's happy, which means she'll sob through the entire father-daughter dance. Emma was doing her makeup in the hall bathroom when she asked that. She's always better in small mirrors. I said, "We'll bring a whole Kleenex factory," and kissed her head. She smelled like the last perfume we picked together, something like that made the house feel like a clean kitchen even when the sink was full. I've learned, at 46, that every marriage is a set of choices you make without noticing. You choose where the keys live. You choose who calls the plumber. You choose who keeps an eye on your parents' prescriptions and who replies to the group texts from the neighborhood association about the raccoon situation. You don't think much about choosing to trust, you do it because you don't know how to live otherwise. I did not go looking for more proof, but proof is an exhibitionist when it thinks it has a point to make. A week after the auto-filled RSVP, my phone buzzed at 1:17 a.m. I was half asleep on the couch, our couch, the one we bought at a warehouse sale when the salesperson said performance fabric like it meant we were athletes at sitting. Emma had fallen asleep in bed with her candle propped on her chest. The notification was a calendar reminder, quarterly marketing off-site prep call. Not ours, it came from the shared family calendar she sometimes used by mistake. Under guests, there was Eric Nolan again, and a location pin that wasn't the office or the hotel where they usually did these things, but a small restaurant we'd gone to twice because their scallops made Emma close her eyes. I lay there watching the tiny dots move on the map like they always do in the movies when someone is being tracked. It wasn't that. It was just a pin. But a pin can be a spear if you're already bleeding. I could have confronted her then. I could have said, "Emma, what is this?" At 2 a.m, while the house is proof that we share a life, the half-done jigsaw puzzle on the table, the pile of shoes by the door, the note she left me on the fridge that said, in Sharpie, "Don't forget Sophie's tuition is due Monday," with a smiley face and a heart, as if bills get cuter that way. Instead I closed my eyes, listened to the refrigerator hum, and put my hand over my ribs like my heart might try to run out of the room. Sophie came home for spring break the next day. 19, a sophomore at Ohio University, studying criminology, which is funny if you are in a family where nobody even stole a candy bar from a gas station. She's Emma's daughter by blood and mine by every other measure. I've been in her life since she was 4, and in photos she's on my shoulders more often than not. She threw her backpack down and moved straight to the fridge like teenagers do. "Why are you up?" she asked, seeing me at the table with a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking, hands around it like a man in a Folgers commercial. "Your mother's snoring," I said. I thought I'd let her run the chainsaw and stay out of its way. Sophie laughed, the sound that still makes me feel like I've done at least one thing right. She made eggs badly and ate them like they were a delicacy. "Lily's dress okay?" she asked. She texted me something about last-minute alterations. "It's a dress," I said. "It's the same dress whether it fits or not, the feelings are the dress." It was the kind of non-answer I give when I'm thinking about something else. Sophie narrowed her eyes in that cop-in-training way and didn't push. She's good that way, she knows when the people she loves are not ready to say the thing and she waits. Emma and I are both second marriages. Mine first with Sarah, hers first with Michael. We've met each other's exes, and it isn't as bad as TV makes it look. People don't always hate the people they used to be married to, mostly they are just tired. Sarah and I are amicable because of Lily. We survived braces and piano recitals together and those terrible parent-teacher conferences where everyone pretends your child is spirited when what they mean is loud. Now we survive wedding planning and whether the DJ will play the right version of your song for our dance. In the weeks before the wedding, Emma was kind. That's what I hate about this. If she'd been mean, it would have been easier to assign villains. She was thoughtful in all the little ways that make a life livable. She put gas in my car when she used it. She bought the good coffee without announcing it like charity. She put a post-it on the bathroom mirror that said, "You've got this." The morning I had a big presentation that bored 12 people into approving it. She touched my back when she walked by me. She talked about paint colors for the bedroom. She said, "Should we go somewhere in June?" In that voice that implies Paris or Maine or the cabin we like, and not any of the places where people go to be alone. I tried to be angry. I conjured a million little fights in the shower and won them all. In the kitchen, when she asked me to open a jar I knew she could open herself, I handed it to her like a man passing a baton and said, in my head, "Who is Eric?" Out loud I said, "This brand switched the lids, that's the problem," and she laughed and said, "Everything's cheap now." In bed I put my hand in the middle of her back and felt her breathe and remembered how affection is the best liar I know. The wedding was on a Saturday in a suburban event center that had too much carpet and tried hard to look like a barn. It had a nice enough room with a bocce court outside and white lights like someone had trapped stars in a net. Lily looked like every girl on her wedding day, herself, amplified. Sarah cried like a person who hates crying and did it anyway. Sarah's husband, the yoga guy, whose real name is Jeff, hugged me and said, "You raised a good kid," and I said, "So did we. Because I like to be generous when I can." The invitation list was big enough that there were people I didn't know and people I used to know and people I should know and people I'd never know. The toasts were going fine. The maid of honor told a story about a summer camp prank that should not be told to a room of 100 people but somehow was adorable anyway. The best man made jokes that landed. The cake was a cake. I was 2 gin and tonics into being a steady man in a suit, ready to be moved and not make a show of it. When the DJ tapped his microphone and said, "Now a few words from the father of the bride," I stood and felt the room shift a little. People always shift during speeches. They look for tissues, for their phones so they can film, for the face they want to read. I looked at Lily, my girl, my first big proof that I could be good at something, my kid with my nose and Sarah's posture. I looked at Emma, in her blue dress, the one we picked, because blue makes her look like a beach day. She smiled at me with her lips and her eyes were older than I remembered. I took the mic and didn't look at my notes. I had planned a speech about Lily's 4th grade science fair volcano that leaked vinegar all over our old kitchen and how she cried and then laughed and then learned to fix things without making the fix a punishment. I had planned a line about how marriage is just 2 people agreeing to keep trying. I had even planned a joke about Jeff's yoga pants because you have to needle the ex's new spouse a little to keep everyone honest. I didn't say any of that. I said, "I want to thank a woman who taught me patience, trust, and resilience." I let it sit for a beat so it didn't sound like a punch line. Because of her, I learned that love without respect is just a trap. I turned, not dramatically, just like a man who knows where the person he's talking about is sitting. "Thank you, Emma." There was a sound I wish I could describe properly. It's the opposite of applause. It's not even silence. It's a room deciding to hold its breath at once. You can feel the air go somewhere else. I pulled an envelope from my inside jacket pocket. It felt heavier than it needed to be. I had printed the emails the way people print tickets when they know they could use their phone but want the ritual of paper. The first was an exchange with subject line off-site logistics that transitioned too quickly into "I miss you and he'll never know" in a photo that was not pornographic but had intention. The second was an RSVP confirmation to my daughter's wedding with Eric Nolan listed as +1 and a note that said, "We'll sit near the exit so we can leave early," and 2 emojis that hurt more than the words. I set the envelope on the table in front of Emma. I didn't throw it or drop it because I am not a man who throws things. I am a man who places them down. "I wish I had learned this lesson a different way," I said, into the microphone but really into the space between us that used to be soft. But I did learn it. And I want my daughter to start her marriage with eyes open. Love each other hard. And respect each other harder. I handed the microphone back to the DJ, who held it like it was a hot mug nobody told him had been in the microwave. I lifted my glass. To Lily and Jason, I said, because a wedding is not a courtroom and I refuse to turn my kid's day into one, even if I'd just unrolled a little bit of transcript. People lifted glasses because people are sheep and because toasts are muscle memory. No one drank. Not right away. The envelope lay there like a small white animal that had decided to die in our family. Emma didn't open it. She didn't need to. She pressed her fingers to the top of it and then to her mouth, as if the paper were hot. Her parents, Marilyn and Arthur, went the color of paper themselves. Marilyn reached for Emma's hand and then thought better of it. Arthur sat straighter, which is all that men like Arthur know to do. Sophie stood without a sound and came to my side, slid her arm around me like a vine that had been training in that direction her whole life. She looked at her mother with eyes that were every age at once. Emma stood so fast her chair scraped. She made a movement like a person who forgot which door is the exit. She moved toward the wrong one, bumped the edge of the DJ table, said I'm sorry to no one and everyone, and then found the right door. She didn't run. She walked like a person trying not to run. Her heels sounded louder than the music would have been if we'd let it start. I sat down. The room stayed quiet. The photographer lowered her camera because there are moments you don't catch without breaking your own heart. Sarah's hand touched my shoulder from behind, a small mercy. Jeff, yoga pants, said Jesus under his breath in a way that did not ask for Jesus. Jason, the groom, looked like a boy who'd been handed a brief on climate change and asked to summarize it. Lily's eyes filled and then didn't overflow because she is good at timing. Someone started clapping, too early and too alone, and stopped. You'd be surprised how quickly humans pivot back to script. The DJ, God bless him, turned the volume down on a song he hadn't turned up and said, "Let's take 5, folks," the way he might have if the bar had run out of limes. People shuffled. The caterers moved like ninjas, clearing plates that didn't need clearing. Marilyn stood and sat and stood again, one hand on her pearls like they were a rosary. Arthur leaned over the table and said to me, not loud, "You could have told us," and I said, "You could have told me, because there are lines you keep in your pocket for years without knowing you packed them." Sophie didn't leave my side. She didn't look away from her mother's empty chair either. "I love you," she said into my shoulder like a pledge. "I know," I said. "I love you too." Later, an hour? 2? The physics of those minutes is weird, like light bending near a massive planet. People started dancing. It was a wedding again, with a bruise. Lily danced with Jason and then with Sarah and then with me. During our dance, she said, very quietly, "I know you did not do that to hurt me," and I said, "I did not," and we counted beats so we didn't have to count anything else. We laughed twice, the way people laugh in hospitals at dumb things because the body needs a safety valve. I stepped on her dress and said, "Sorry," and she said, "You always have big feet." When the night was almost over, after the terrible coffee and the better-than-expected cake, I went out to the parking lot. Emma stood by her car with her head against the cool metal like it could tell her something. She wasn't crying. She was past crying. I said, "I need the keys, because I am a petty human and because I didn't trust my mouth with bigger sentences." She handed them to me without looking up. "Can we talk?" she said, and the words came out gravelly, like she'd swallowed something sharp. "Not now," I said. I said what I needed to say. Not everything, but enough. She nodded like a student taking a lecture from a professor who is about to fail her. "I didn't RSVP," she said. "It autofilled. I never hit send." "It sent," I said. She winced. "That's not a moral defense. It's just a thing my mouth needed to say." "Right. David," she said, and I hated the way my name sounded like a request. I didn't think I don't know what I thought. That I had time to steer out of it. That no one would get hurt if I kept it floating, not touching. I thought I could be two people until I decided which one to be thoroughly. "You can't," I said. "We aren't a buffet. You don't get to sample." She laughed once, bitter plate clatter. "I know." She looked at the sky like maybe the moon had better counseling than me. For what it's worth, I told him today I couldn't keep going. I told him I loved you. That sentence is a truck with two destinations, I said. You don't get to drive it to one and say you meant the other. She put her hand on the roof of the car like she needed to steady both of them. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I do expect you to do what you did in there, which is be decent while telling the truth. I married a good man. I just forgot. I nodded because there was nothing to solve in a parking lot. We'll talk, I said, which is America's way of postponing disaster. At home, very late, after I'd taken off my suit like it was a costume that had done its job, I posted the video. Sarah had filmed it on her phone because that's what you do at weddings, you film everything and later you delete most of it. I asked if I could use it. She said, "Are you sure?" I was not. I did it anyway. I captioned it, "Never be afraid to tell the truth beautifully." It was a line that had come to me halfway through the speech, like a bird that decides to sit on your shoulder for a second. It felt right and maybe also like a performance. Humans are like that, we want to look good even when we're bleeding. I didn't think about viral. I thought maybe my high school friend Jeff would comment solid and my cousin Dana would say proud of you, and a few people would DM me to ask if I was okay. I went to bed and slept like a man who had been carrying a safe all day and finally set it down. When I woke up, the video had 1 million views. By lunch it had 3. By dinner my phone was a broken dam. There is a genre of comment that will restore your faith in strangers: men who said, "I've been there and I said nothing and I wish I'd said something," women who said, "My father never said it out loud, thank you for saying it," others who said, "Dignity is loud in a quiet room." There is also a genre that will make you tired: people who used my life as a Rorschach to work out their parents' divorce. I tried not to read them all. Sophie told me to give her my login so she could filter, and I said no because I am still old-fashioned about some kinds of boundaries. Emma texted once, "I saw it." I wrote back nothing because there are times when no reply is the only reply that isn't a new lie. Marilyn called the next day and asked if she could come over. I said yes because saying no would have been a different kind of cruel. She sat at our kitchen table like she's been sitting at kitchen tables for 50 years and said, "I am not going to try to talk you out of what you're going to do." She smoothed the tablecloth where it wrinkled. "I am going to say that my daughter made a choice and I made 1,000 that led to that choice being possible. I am not asking forgiveness. I am asking to keep a seat at whatever table remains." I said, "You will always be Sophie's grandmother," and we both understood that was both an answer and a limit. Arthur sent me an email with no body and a subject line that said, "We will pay for Sophie's next semester." I replied, "We can afford our child." He wrote back, "It is not charity. It is penance," and I wanted to laugh because Arthur had found a word that fit him like his Sunday suit. I said yes. Sometimes you accept what people need to give in order to stay human. Emma moved into a rental a mile away. She and I hired a mediator because we are people who like lines and dates in the sense that adults are supervising. We agreed to a separation that looked like divorce without the stamp yet. We agreed on a schedule for Sophie's breaks. We agreed on the dog, who decided for himself anyway. We agreed we would not turn each other into content, irony noted, given the video, and we would not ask our friends to pick sides. The world picked for them. I did not become the legend people on the internet said I was. I became a man who still had to take the trash out on Thursdays and remember to buy the decent brand of paper towels because the cheap ones feel like a hospital gown. I became a guy whose co-workers looked at him longer in meetings, whose boss asked him to take a day and then forgot he had asked, whose barista said on me twice and I tipped too much and we broke even. Sophie came home for the summer and we made dinner together more often than we used to. She's good at chopping in the way of people who like control. She asked me once, "Do you wish you had screamed?" And I said, "No," faster than I expected. She nodded. "You'd have scared me more if you yelled," she said. "This way you scared me just enough to pay attention." We went to 2 therapy appointments, together. The therapist had plants that looked like they were being held hostage, and a smile that made me trust him against my will. Sophie said out loud what no one had wanted to say, "I don't know how to keep loving Mom and keep loving you without making one of you into a villain." The therapist said a sentence I might get tattooed if I were a different man, You can love someone who has done a bad thing without crowning them the king of bad things. We both breathed like people who had been given permission to be human. Emma and I, at the mediator's suggestion, wrote letters. Mine was full of metaphors because that's how my brain copes: houses and weather and roads. Hers was full of sentences that started with "I thought" and "I felt" and ended with "I was wrong." She didn't ask me to forgive her in the letter. She said, "I would like to be a person who could earn it if you ever felt like you could give it." It's an almost beautiful sentence. I put the letter in a drawer with car titles and birth certificates and the handprint Sophie made in preschool that still fits against my palm like a prophecy. There are important papers, and then there are the ones that only matter to your ribcage. The video kept doing what videos do in the wild. People stitched it into their own stories, badly sometimes, generously sometimes. A local news station asked if I'd sit down for a segment on honesty in the age of ghosting, and I told them if they put me in a segment with that title, my mother would turn off the TV out of basic decency. They laughed and said, "Fair," and did not call back. A church we don't go to asked me to speak at something called a Truth and Grace men's breakfast, and I said, "I don't do early and I'm bad at grace," and we both laughed in that way that actually earns the laugh. Here is the part where you want me to tell you whether we divorced. I could say it's complicated and be the kind of man who doesn't answer. The truth is we are divorcing slowly, kindly, with as little collateral damage as paperwork allows. We are not enemies and we are not together. We are parents to Sophie and alumni of a decade. We text about trash pickup and whether she left her charger here. We do not text about the day in the ballroom. Sometimes she sends me a photo of Sophie and me from years ago, the kind where we are both sunburned and happy and there is ketchup on my shirt. "I loved you then," she writes once, and all the time between then and now is a string you could trip over. Once, months after the wedding, I saw Eric in the parking lot of the office where Emma and I used to both work. He was leaning against his car drinking a protein shake like it had wronged him. He looked smaller without the myth I built. He saw me and put the bottle down like it could protect him. He said my name like a question he did not have time for. I said, "Don't," and he didn't. That was the whole conversation and it was the right size. Lily and Jason came over for dinner a few Sundays into their marriage. We made pasta properly this time, didn't burn the garlic, opened a bottle of red we bought because the label looked like something a book club would pick. Lily hugged me longer than necessary and said, "You didn't ruin anything," and I said, "I know, and I didn't, entirely, but I'm learning." Jason helped me fix a wobbly chair and we became, in that very male way, related. On a Tuesday in late fall, I stopped by that same event center for a work luncheon because the town uses it for everything. The lights were on, the carpet was still too much, and the bocce cord had a leaf caught in the corner like it was hiding from winter. I stood for a second in the place where the DJ had handed me a microphone and I almost bowed to the room out of habit. The woman setting up coffee said, "You're the guy," and I said, "Some days," and she gave me a muffin like absolution. Sometimes at night, I still hear the scrape of Emma's chair on the ballroom floor as she stood to leave. Sometimes I hear the laughter of the internet and I am proud and also a little ashamed that I let them into my house that way. Mostly I hear normal sounds, the neighbor's dog, the furnace kicking on, Sophie brushing her teeth too loudly, my own fork against a plate when I make eggs alone and eat them directly over the sink because I am lazy and because some clichés are comforting. If I am a legend, it is only at my own table, which is not a bad kingdom. The other night, Sophie came home from campus unannounced. She tossed her bag and sat cross-legged on the counter while I made grilled cheese the right way, the slow way, butter both sides, patient heat. She watched me and said, out of nowhere, "You taught me to do hard things without making the whole world watch." I laughed and held up the spatula like a toast. "Except once," I said. "Except once," she nodded, and smiled, and we ate, and the house kept time. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.